Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to Keep Calm It's Just a Snake podcast. This is the first one with the guest, and what a guest he is. We have Ryan Mcveigh, works for Zilla, basically started up, took over, made the Madison Area Herpetological Society what it is today. Huge proprietor for USARK. Honestly, if you guys have been in the industry for even a little while, or you see the brand Zilla at Petco, you probably know kind of who this guy is. So how you doing, Ryan?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm just enjoying a lot of time at home.
Yeah, right. That's how it is going for everybody right now. Do you want to kind of get rolling, kind of how you got your start into reptiles?
Yeah, so it's a super unique story that you'll never hear again when you ask a reptile person.
Yep, absolutely.
I liked dinosaurs, and then I caught a garter snake, and then I thought reptiles were awesome.
That's crazy. Garter
I know,
snake?
it's so unique. It's no one's ever done that. But no, I've liked reptiles since I was since my memory works and past that. Like there's pictures of me younger than I remember loving reptiles. So it's just always been a thing for me. And I started keeping them when I was a kid. I started keeping like salamanders I caught and garter snakes and things like that. I was the kid that had the jars under his bed and kept something in his shoebox for a while, and then it got out, and I just assumed that it just went back outside. That's probably what it did. And then, I like in sixth grade, I got suspended from ever going on science outings again because I put a bunch of garter snakes in my pocket and brought them back into school and put them in my backpack.
Well, that's amazing.
I know. And then like the real tough guy, when I was sixth grade, the tough guy bully guy, he was the one that ratted on me because he was afraid of snakes.
No, of course.
It kind of gave me a one-up, though. Oh, I didn't let him live it down. I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. That's cool how you're afraid of snakes. I'm not really afraid of you. No one else is anymore. So, yeah, it's kind of always been like that. And then I went to college to do engineering. It's another thing that I really loved and passionate about. And then just kept my reptile passion going through school. And when I got out, I was in college, I was working at a pet store in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And, I really loved it, and I got to see a way bigger industry that existed that I hadn't really seen. Loved reptiles my whole life, but I just never got exposed to the bigger side of it yet. No Herp Society meetings where I was at or anything like that. And there's really no access points nearby for me to know that existed. So once I was in college and found that's when it just went nuts. And I went from one leopard gecko that I'd had since I was like 12 to 80 reptiles in the first year I worked at the pet store.
Oh, holy moly.
Yeah, dude, it was nuts. It was bad. Like my dad knows this now because I joked about it in front of him, and then he realized I was serious and he was super excited about it. But I actually increased my student loans one semester because there was some reptiles I wanted to buy and I didn't have the cash.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna advise everybody that's young and out there and it seems like a good idea, you're going to pay that off for 40 freaking years. Just get more jobs and save up.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but now I was working like 3 jobs, going to school full time, getting a master's, and just taking care of reptiles and breeding stuff. And yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot, but it's always been something that my whole room was reptiles, and it was just like my space. I loved it.
Nice. Well, so you brought up the Herp Society, so that's what I really want to kind of get into, because truth be told, there's a Herp Society here in Colorado, but the whole kind of community, industry, professional breeding, even just Herp Society is kind of really lacking here. So, kind of how did you kind of go about like getting yourself established into that, and then just kind of really wrangling it all yourself?
Yeah, so it was myself in the beginning. I have an incredible board of some of the most amazing people that exist in the hobby in general, but they're all local, all driven people that are just as like I found when I started the Herp, like before I started the Herp Society, when I started doing education, when I worked at that store, a teacher would come in and she was like, it'd be really cool if somebody could do a show. And I'm like, I can do a show. That'd be easy. I love talking to kids at the store and stuff. This would be easy. So I went and did it, and instantly that was like, I need to do this every day.
Right.
This was awesome. Like I found that my passion for reptiles was not nearly as strong as my passion for educating others and getting them excited about reptiles. And that's where, once I moved from Milwaukee to Madison, Wisconsin, I talked to some people. There's these things called forums, and we used to talk on there. and there was yeah, right. I know. There was a forum for Wisconsin, like Wisconsin reptile forums, and we all chatted on there. That's how I got a lot of the connections I had when I was, starting out. And at one point, somebody had put up a forum post, and they're like, "Hey, there's never been a herp society. There's not a herp society in Wisconsin. There hadn't been for a long time." And the one that was there went out with a bang and had a lot of bad reputation for going out and doing collecting trips and stuff like that. They're potentially linked to the fact that bull snakes are endangered in Wisconsin because of over collection. So
that's bad.
Yeah, so it wasn't something people wanted around. And after it was gone, they were happy it was gone. But then we lost that any kind of community in the state and like organization. And when somebody posted that, I was like, well, I love education. I like doing the outreach. I'm digging. I've been in the hobby my whole life, but I really dug into the industry, real deep hobby side of it, probably for about 3 years. And I was like, this sounds awesome. I'm just like, who wants to do it? And everybody's like, this is how starting a herp society is. Who wants to get started? And everybody's like, yeah. And then you get everybody together and you're like, okay, here's what we need to do. And they're like, wait, I thought we were just going to hang out. Like, we have to do things. And I'm like, yeah, there's things to do. And then you end up alone. So I would say the first thing to anybody that wants to start one is be so excited and driven and passionate about doing it that you don't care if you put in an extra 40 hours a week of your own time to do it. You have to have that intensity, because there's going to be a lot of times within an organization and any nonprofit where you're just not going to have the structure you need or the support you need, or you're going to get board members that over the last decade, we've had an amazing amount of board members. Some of the greatest people and best friends in my life right now are from that. At the same time, I've had people who stepped up and they were all gung-ho and they were ready to go, and I gave them their first assignment, and then I never heard from them again.
Yeah,
they just fizzled out, or they're excited to be on the board, but they don't really want to do a lot. They just like the idea that they're on the board. So you deal with a lot of that, and you have to be able to, anytime that there's a setback, you have to be able to step up and fill that space, which for the Herp Society right now, I'm the executive director. I finally, as of last year, created the executive director position and moved into that, because there's 3 branches. Each branch has their own board and president, and that means, like, if one of the presidents steps down and nobody takes that position, I'm president for that branch. If the event coordinator for another branch steps down and nobody takes it, I'm event coordinator there too. Like, great. So I'm filling in and coordinating everything, because that's it. But that's the dedication you have to bring to it in order to make it successful. And that's a big part of what's been such a driver for it, is putting in that time and effort, getting excited, and then sharing that passion with people is the easy part. Keeping the whole momentum of the business part of it going and keeping things moving and progressing, that's the stressful, hard part.
Oh man, that's insane. So I just realized there's probably a fair few people here that don't actually even know what a Herp Society does. So Can you kind of expound on that?
Yeah, so Herp Societies have been around for, I want to say the first ones were in the 20s or 30s that were more professional societies. It was professional organizations of herpetologists and biologists that would get together, and it was more academic level. Into the 80s, that's when the hobby became a little bit more hobby. And like, you started seeing bearded dragons come in, and corn snakes morphs were starting to kind of happen, and husbandry like equipment was actually becoming a thing. It wasn't just build a wooden box or put it in a jar anymore.
Right.
There was like UV bulbs weren't even around until the mid 80s. So a lot of that stuff wasn't a real hobby until then. It was, but it wasn't like an industry like it is now. It was very niche-y and here and there. And those groups of those herp societies were groups of people in areas that would get together, and they would, do conservation work around them. They would just do anything they could reptile, create funding for different things, and then bring in speakers to kind of talk and spread education. It's just a club of people who love reptiles and want to learn about them. Now, sometimes it's a professional organization, sometimes it's a hobby organization. Most of them are hobby organizations, but a couple of them are like for herpetologists only, really. But the hobbyist ones end up being more what Madison is and what Chicago and Minnesota Herp Society and Hoosier and all those ones in the Midwest and the ones all over the place, where it's dedicated reptile enthusiasts that are excited about getting together, having that connection, outreaching in the community. We go out and do schools, we do fairs, we've done 2 TV spotlights and things, just getting reptiles in front of people and getting them the right information so that they can care for them properly in captivity, not fear them, and then conserve them when it's possible to actually build conservation, show people why these animals are so important to the habitats and the environments they live in.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we just basically created a big club to be the voice, the voice box for the reptiles in our area.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. I love that. It's definitely something that I feel like that's kind of what happened with me too, where, you know, it was really cool to, you know, have ball pythons and corn snakes and even boas and berms. But then I went on this little trip out to Virginia, and I was just kind of talking with one of the employees there, and they had a couple like reptiles on display, and this other guest walked into the room, and like her eyes just like went immediately, and she was absolutely terrified. And then over the course of like 5-10 minutes of just kind of talking with us, and she went from being not even wanting to be in the room and then holding a corn snake and going, oh, this is absolutely a beautiful creature. And that's kind of what clicked for me too, where I kind of made the shift from, I want to be the next Kevin McCurley, I want to be the next Justin Koboka and make $8 billion ball pythons, to I want this expression. I love this feeling. I want to teach kids to grandparents that these things are amazing. And so that's just really cool that you're, you know, into that. And
well, that's the thing, like the worst day I can have, and I've had this where I've had a crap day. I haven't slept for like 2 days. I feel like garbage. And I have a show that I got to go do at the library or something because I signed up to do it. And I actually had one of the president of the Milwaukee branch. He did this to me once. He works with me, and he came up and he's like, dude, I'm exhausted. He had a bunch of stuff going on. His life was really crazy at the time. He's like, I can't go do this show today. And I'm like, I can't leave because I didn't know that you couldn't do it. So I can't cover you. I have meetings. And nobody else that we know can cover you in the next, like, it's 3 hours from now. I'm not going to get somebody to cover you. And I'm like, dude, just trust me. You know this. And he's a big outreach guy too. He loves it. I'm like, you know this. Go do it. You're going to be exhausted when you get there. Your eyes are going to be all red and crappy. And then you're going to start talking and you're going to start interacting with kids. And you're going to get energized as you do it. And you're going to start feeling it. And then by the time you're done, you're going to get in the car and just be pumped up and like you get so energized from just people loving it and people getting excited about what you're exciting. It's just this snowball effect. And then so then he comes back from it like 4 hours later and he's like, dude, I feel awesome. You were right. And I'm like, I told you. I'm like, it sucks to push yourself through that when you're like, all I want to do is curl up on the floor and cry and sleep.
Right.
Like, I'm so tired. Then it's like, just, you got to get through that. And once you do that, it just fuels you every single time, no matter what event we do, how stressful it is, this is why I'm bald. I do too many events. I'm stressed out. I have kids. Like, all of that just disappears when you get like these moments with people. And it's anybody from grandparents to toddlers that you can have this moment with. It's just super cool, especially when you overcome a fear. Some of the coolest moments of my life dealing with reptiles are in educational outreach and having those moments with people overcoming their fears.
It's just awesome. Absolutely awesome. So I know that you did the Madison area Herp, so I say it's the Herp Society, and I know that takes up a large part of your time, but that's not all you do. So you also professionally work in the industry. So what's kind of, like, what if someone said, holy cow, you work for this crazy company, like, what do you do? Like, just like, what did you do at work, outside of COVID and all that stuff? Like, what would be a typical Wednesday for you?
Well, at random reptile company that I work at. So I've for the last almost 6 years, I've been the brand manager for Zilla. I do the marketing aspect of it. So I do, a typical day is a lot of emails and a ton of meetings. But it's everything from coming up with product designs and working through that with my R&D team to promotions and getting stuff out there for trying to get sales going, trying to get working with customers, to working with my graphics team to design the packaging and get the website updated. And I mean, every aspect that anything that has the Zilla name on it, from being an idea till it hits the shelf, I'm involved in. Wow. And then also all the background stuff that nobody ever even sees or knows exists, and all the stuff that we do with philanthropy and donations and USARK and reptile shows. I do all of that.
Right. That is, I think we've come across each other a couple times over shows. Yeah. I don't know. I'm one of 1,000 people that we probably came across. That's actually how I first met you. So that's just absolutely really cool. Like, I know there's a couple different big ones out there, but it is really cool to I know a lot of people don't think about that kind of background background stuff that does take place, not even necessarily behind closed doors, that just isn't, the in your face, this is my first corn snake kit box. Right. And actually we'll just have this keep on going, like doing stuff with USARK. So, USARK, United States, Reptile all day.
Association of Reptile Keepers. No, I get it, man. I'm too fried with all the meetings and stuff. I can't even find words.
I know. I recorded 2 videos this morning. I had a 2-hour reptile presentation yesterday. I forgot to close an enclosure. I just saw an AccuMonitor scoot across the floor 5 minutes before this started. So
it's all good. Last week I was sitting at my desk and one of my Peacock monitors walked across my printer, and I was like, I didn't know one was out. When did you get out? Yeah. And it was an hour. It was an hour of going through every cage. I'm like, no, there's 2 in there. No, there's 3 in there. There's supposed to be 3 in there. Yeah. I finally found which one it went in. I'm like, all right, I don't even know. I haven't even been in that enclosure and the doors were closed. So that thing, I think he got it last weekend when I was rearranging, and he was probably in a cork tube or something, and I didn't see it. Set the cork tube down, and he scooted under or something. I don't know. But yeah, I sat down and it's just, I was like,
what? Yep.
All right, I'll just pick you up and figure out where you go. Yeah. So
there we go.
It's the reptile life, man.
Yep, constantly. So USARK. So that's the organization that I know you were probably the person to promote them more than me. With your podcast, at the beginning of every single one.
Yep.
So USARK, they're doing everything they can to literally fight for our rights to keep these things, because pretty much on every level of government, there's something being introduced almost every week to really take away our ability to do that. So, kind of what are the things that, us as keepers can do to kind of help contribute to USARK, and even, stuff that, the larger companies like Zilla or other places do to USARK to kind of shed a little bit light, because I throw it out there a lot, but I'm not sure if a lot of people really know too much about it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of misconceptions about USARK, especially when it came to the big python bans and things like that, and them fighting for it. And then all the other people are like, well, they don't fight for my rights to keep ball pythons. Yes, they do. But at the time, the federal government wasn't banning ball pythons. So shut up. And to be totally honest, that retic anaconda Burmese Lacey Act, that had boas and ball pythons on it before USARK got involved. So you're welcome, all of you, for all the work that they did that you didn't even know happened. And that's the thing with USARK is president of USARK is Phil Goss, good friend and somebody I look up to and a mentor, an amazing person. I mean, he's basically the reptile hobby Jesus. He is our protector. So everybody should have a poster of him on your wall and appreciate the time and effort and insane amount of crap that guy goes through just so you can keep your leopard gecko. I mean, this is somebody who sleeps twice a month so that you can have a pet corn snake. It's a big deal. And so USARK is the only organization in the United States that is a nonprofit lobbying organization fighting for the rights of reptile keepers. The Pet Industry Joint Advisory Council, PJAC, also watches for reptile stuff and bans, and they get a little involved. But USARK is the main leader, and Phil is on the board with the rest of us on that reptile subcommittee. So he's a big part of it. Is USARK is even part of PJAC. So when it comes down to it, this is what I say to everybody. So when I was I was an engineer in my past before I worked with Zilla. And being an engineer, I was in engineering societies that we had to pay dues for. We got, publications and things like that through it. And it was a professional organization that if you were an engineer, you just were expected to be a part of it. And it was like $1,200 a year or $2,500 a year. It wasn't cheap. This isn't like $100. This was thousands of dollars to get a book and a couple pamphlets once a year. Like, it was a big thing to be a part of it. And in reptiles and in the pet industry, we don't have that. You just get to do it because you want to, and that's great. I look at USARK as my reptile keeping dues. This is my dues to something for being able to have the freedom that I have to do this. Like,
that is, yeah.
That's how I look at it. And that money goes to, so USARK uses that to do a lot of the lobbying they do. An enormous amount of the money just goes to attorneys, because if you want to fight Washington, you basically just get money to pay attorneys. That's all they do, and it's not fast. That's the other thing people have to grumble about with USARK is like, oh, they're not doing anything. No, well, if you sue the government, it doesn't happen in a week. Like, no. It's 3 years or more. Like, so there's not always a call to action, but stuff is always happening. There's always an action alert on the USARK website. They are always watching things that are happening and working with local people to fight those laws. It's just, it may not be in your state. It may not pertain to the animals you specifically keep. But that doesn't mean that it's not important. And the other thing to think about is, yeah, maybe you don't keep big snakes. Maybe you breed leopard geckos and they ban big snakes. Who cares? It's big snakes. Okay, well then they ban ball pythons, and the ball python guys are all pissed, and that happens. And you breed leopard geckos, so why would you care? Well, and then they ban crocodilians and venomous, and all of a sudden you're kind of getting down to not too many animals left as they kind of keep hacking. And I don't want to wait till they get to me and then realize I have no allies left. And that's something everybody needs to think about. We need to be a team. We need to be a unified force from the beginning. So anybody that's like, oh, USARK doesn't do anything, those are people you don't want to hang out with. They're just, that's bad juju. Get them out of your life. If it's your husband, tell him sorry, kick him out. Whatever. Like, anybody who doesn't support USARK is not somebody I'm going to hang out with, because they don't understand the value of our industry and what it really means and what that organization does.
It's absolutely true. And luckily I don't run across that too often, because they did a big deal for us here in Colorado a couple of years ago. They were going to be charging people $500 a year if you had more than 4 of any species of one sex, period. Didn't matter what it was. And there was board meetings at, the Department of Agriculture, and USARK came out, they stepped up. And yeah, they're still an overreaching kind of state entity, but they did a lot for us. And the way you said it is, that's us paying our dues for a right to keep it. That is the absolute best way I've ever heard anyone say that, is that is our dues for being able to keep these animals. Because it always starts up there, but as it whittles down. And so that's, and also responsible reptile keepers. Exactly.
It's only responsible. USARK isn't like anybody should keep reptiles no matter what. It's responsible reptile keeping. And so anyway, any ways people can get involved is, one, get on the USARK website and join their mailing list, so that when things are popping up, especially because things will pop up around you that you don't know exist, or you might not know that your state has a law coming up. You might want to know that, before your entire collection becomes illegal and you have to get rid of it. You might want to know that, and you might want to be part of the people that they're talking to get to these meetings and to fight back. So get on the mailing list, become a member. There's a $5 bronze membership. It's a $5 a month membership. Like, I don't know anybody who would even notice that come out of their bank account. Like, it's $5. It's one stop at a gas station for anything you're going to buy. And that's all you need to save the hobby. If everybody if everybody did that, this would be a totally different world we live in, on how we keep animals, the access to things that we have, the laws, the pushback that we get, PETA and HSUS fighting us. Like, it would be a different world, because we wouldn't be an ant swinging at an elephant, which is what we are. Which, by the way, Phil and USARK is, that's an ant with a tiny little grenade launcher that works, because I mean, this seriously is the ant versus the elephant, and the ant keeps winning, which is insane. So that tells you how good these guys are and how good their attorneys are, and the things that they're doing. They know what they're doing. For example, it's just for anybody that doesn't realize this, USARK's yearly budget is between $500,000 and $750,000, give or take. It's under $1 million. And that mostly comes from the show donations, memberships, and big sponsor donations. So Zilla, Zoomed, Timberline, all of those guys. So that's where the majority of it comes from. But either way, it's not that much. Just HSUS, just the Humane Society of the United States, who's one of our biggest proponents, and an animal rights group that wants nobody to keep any reptiles at all, ever, for any reason. Their yearly budget is $200 million. And then there's also PETA, Defenders of Wildlife, a whole bunch of other ones, and they all work together with their insane budgets against our budget of less than like 0.25% of theirs combined. And we're winning. Like, that's crazy. And if every person who kept more than 5 reptiles in the country was a member of USARK, our budget wouldn't be $500,000. It'd be $20 million. Now imagine look at what we're doing with $500,000 versus like $400 million. Imagine if we had 20 million, what we could do against that. I mean, that's crazy. It wouldn't be Phil. It'd be a guy in every freaking state. You know, everybody, it'd be lobbyists. Your town hall could have a meeting and 20 guys would show up, like, to fight it, because we'd have that power. And right now it's just, they are the heroes that we need and really are. But we're treating them kind of like this annoying thing that's just around. And it really needs to be, USARK needs to be treated as seriously as the savior that the hobby has. And the only one. So the only one. Like, there's herp societies and stuff like that, and we do things locally, and I work with USARK to try and do things locally to help on that level, but that's not the same as them actually going to Washington, being in, at the House meetings and actually speaking on behalf of reptile keepers for the entire nation. That's a huge deal, and that's something that I think we all take for granted way too much.
Yep. I mean, just even when something big happens, it affects everyone else, even if you don't keep it. Like everything that happened in Florida. Yep. Even if you don't breed tegus, even if you don't have, even if you don't have an iguana, it's trickle down. It's going to affect you really quickly too. But
especially when they're picking places like that, where guess what? Hey, reptile hobby. Guess where 90% of your tegus and iguanas come from?
Right,
Florida. So if they kill Florida, then the only people you're getting tegus from are people who are breeding them outside of Florida, which is very few, because in Florida they just put them in pens outside and they breed. There's not many other places in the U.S. you can do that, and not many people want to build like a 10 by 10 room and put it 4 feet deep so that they can breed tegus in it.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of species like that. Especially all the spiny tail iguanas. Most of them come out of Florida. A lot of tortoises, turtles, and tortoises. Majority of that industry comes out of Florida. It's Florida and California really that have the one. It's because it's the major import sites for the country, and then 2, it's because of the weather. So those 2 states are critical to the hobby existing.
Exactly. So pay your dues.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it.
I don't live in Florida, but guess what? It doesn't matter if everything you buy comes out of Florida.
Exactly. That's how it works. So we're just gonna kind of just keep this chugging along. So you do the Herp Society, you work for Zilla, you work with USARK, and you also have something of a rescue going too. Me and my wife, we get downtime, and then we fill it with, well, she doesn't, I do, and then she yells at me. But I'm like, we have a day off. That's cool. I have 700 projects and 800 more boards I want to be on. So that's kind of how it goes. So about the time I started the Herp Society, and this was before I was with my wife, she started Friends of Scales Reptile Rescue. She's an exotic certified veterinary technician, and she's worked in exotics her whole career. So she worked for Brookfield Zoo for a while, and then she's worked for
Chicago, Chicago Exotics Animal Hospital. There we go. Oh, wow. Just totally farted. Brain fart. But no, so she worked there for like 13 years. She worked with exotics, and she's published. She's on the board for the Association of Reptile and Amphibian Veterinarians for a second time. This is the second run of hers. She's involved in everything. I mean, it's ridiculous how super cool. I get to be married to one of the top medical reptile minds in the country. So it's awesome. But she saw the need for rescue reptiles with people coming into the clinic and not being able to take their animals, wanting to dump them on the clinic. Started Reptile Rescue and has been rocking it ever since. I think in the last decade, she's taken in and rehomed well over 2,500 animals.
It's
not just like going here or there, or just we have animals with educators around the country. We have animals in zoos and aquariums around the country. Shed Aquarium on Chicago has animals from the rescue. We work with a ton of veterinarians and zoo professionals and stuff from all over the nation. And this is the only nonprofit reptile rescue that's licensed and insured in the state of Illinois. And it's one of the only reptile rescue businesses in the Midwest. There's a couple, and there's plenty of people that do rescue and are 501c3, but like the Herp Societies will help do rescue, but that's a secondary thing they do. They're an educational organization. They're a Herp Society. They just have the ability to be a resource for rescue. That's what this is defined as on all the paperwork, is a reptile rescue, where she's got USDA certification. She's works with ID, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. This is crazy stuff that she's been able to work with, and the things that have come through the house. And and since we've been married, when I moved in, I ripped apart the whole garage. We never really used it anyway. It was just storage for stuff. Tore out the garage and built it into a facility. So now we have the rescue facility, and it's awesome. It's so cool to see what she's been able to turn it into. And my involvement is I live here, so I scoop poop.
There you go.
I'm technically on the board, but I feel like that she was like, well, you do stuff and you live here, you should just be on the board. Like actually get to vote what happens in my house. So I'm like, well, I appreciate that. Our house, but so like that's just been super cool, and the stories that come out of that and stuff too has been amazing. So the Reptile Rescue is something cool, and anybody who wants to check it out, we have a ton of animals. We ship around the country. The adoption fees are laughable. I mean, they're basically nothing. Like ball pythons are $10 no matter what morph it is. I've adopted a $4,000 ball python for $10 before, so. Like, we don't care. It went to a little kid. He's gonna love it its whole life. Like, and not realize that he could sell it and buy his first car. But that's what it's just families, and it's a ball. To me, there's no breeder value. It's a pet. It's a ball python, and that's how we run the adoptions. The only way you're gonna pay over $75 for anything is if like you want a giant sulcata, and I have to get it. Like when we get it in, I have to house it for you. You're paying for it. That $200 isn't going to cover the wall that it walked through and like the door it ripped off.
Yep.
So, and the other part of it too is like, if you can't pay $200 for a sulcata, you don't have the money to house a sulcata.
No, you don't. They are little tanks. Like, I have to build a 12 by 12 shed in the spring because mine, which is a rescue, is growing like a weed.
So my advice for you on it: cinder blocks, sharpened 4x4s, and sledgehammer them down into the holes.
That's awesome.
It's the only way he's not getting out. And then he'll just dig a 20-foot hole under it anyway. So
that's okay. We like Speed Bump. He's a good boy.
Right. Well, and that's the thing that's kind of cool too, is Erica does a lot of the education outreach we do with the rescue, and we do C2E2, the Comic-Con in Chicago, which is a freaking blast to be the only people there with reptiles. It's not a reptile show. It's people all dressed up in cosplay, kids that we're introducing to. Like, I love doing those shows because I don't have, like, if I go to like Tinley, the reptile show, and I wanted to like show off reptiles as an education, I could bring a Komodo dragon, and then people there would be like, it's kind of cool, but my cousin's got one or whatever. You know what I mean? But then I go to like C2E2 and I'm like, here's a normal ball python, and they look like at it like it's made out of gold. Like it's the greatest thing they've ever seen. I'm like, well, here's a corn snake.
There it is.
That's awesome. I love that. It makes it so much more fun than like, here's this cool thing. And they're like, yeah, I have 4 of those. I don't give a crap. Well, whatever. Get out of here. Like, it's way more fun to do like those kind of events.
Totally get that. That's absolutely amazing. So, I mean, I'm kind of glad that you brought up Tinley. So there's kind of like this, I guess, separation of reptile keepers. You have kind of the hobbyists and the people who just have like a couple as pets that, you know, have a ball python that just sits on their lap while they sit there and watch TV all day. And that's absolutely fine. That's 90% of people who have a scaly animal in their house. And then there's
all the sick people. Yeah.
Yes.
All the diseased, mentally unstable people who do this to their house.
Exactly. Which is that, like if I had a decent setup for one of my other reptile rooms, I would be just, you would hear the tortoise trying to dig through the 2 layers of plywood.
Yeah, at some point you might see something hit the glass here. It's the crocodile that hates me and like thinks it's funny to try and bite my face. So, I mean, I get it. There's, yep.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That is. Crocodilians. Most don't really like me either. Or Peacock Monitors.
It loves all the women in the house. He's a prick. I waited my whole life to see one in person, let alone like be able to touch one. It's a Osteolaemus, an African dwarf crocodile. And it was given to me as a gift, which is for a lot of the conservation work me and Erica do with crocodilians and donations and things. It's a huge thing we support, and we're both big croc nuts. And this was like a dream thing for me. And when they handed it to me in the box, I almost started crying. I was so excited. And it was this huge moment for me. And then I bring it home, and it comes right out of the cage into Erica's hand, and it chirps like it's her, like it's mom. She's just like, I don't know who you are, but I love you, and we should hang out, and it's cool. And then I sit down, and he's like, wham, 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 wham. I'm like,
oh my gosh,
let me put something up here so you don't bust all your teeth out, you little jerk. Yeah, I open up the door, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna come out, and then his face opens, and and he's like, I'm gonna eat you. And then she walks over, and he just squawks at her and sits down, and I'm like, dude, come on. Yeah,
that's like our blue tegu. I got him, and I was so excited to see him. He was so amazing, and he will just sit there and hit glass, open mouth, scream and squawk. And then when it's time to clean out the cage, the wife just goes down, opens it up, and he just walks right out and hangs out in the room.
Yeah, but dude, I don't know what it is.
I don't.
It's because you wanted it too bad. It was like this goal of yours, and then that's just their way of being like, calm it down a notch. We're not friends yet.
No, I am not the cake you get to eat. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
So, back to
back to like beginners and hobbyists.
You're right. Yeah. So there's like this kind of big distinction of like, the 2 different types of keepers as well, kind of like the species that they keep in general. Like we all know like for anyone who's been in the hobby for more than about 5-6 years, they kind of start to poo like corn snakes and ball pythons and Beardies. And then
it's a cool thing to do, man.
Say what?
It's a cool thing to do. You just crap on ball python breeders, and then and then eventually they usually get into ball pythons. But
yeah, I know it's ridiculous. And there's the stuff that it's the like you said, my buddy has a Komodo dragon. That's cool. Whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I know you keep a lot of just weird stuff. Like most of the animals that most people would know are, I'm assuming, through the rescue, right?
Yeah. I mean, I keep some stuff that like I would say an intermediate to potentially entry level keeper might know, depending on how into the hobby they're getting. But no, there's a ton of stuff that I could take pictures of. That I put up a picture of some swifts I got from a guy. They're Oplurus genus. They're little iguanid swifts from Madagascar, and I put up a picture of them. And even like top reptile people that I know that have written books I read as a kid didn't know what they were. They were like, "That's cool, redheaded agama," and I'm like, "Try again."
Yep.
But at the same time, I didn't know they existed until the dude that had them showed them to me, and I was like, "Oh yeah, no, I need that. I don't know what it is, but I need it."
Okay, so that's
yep.
That's what I was gonna get at. So instead of kind of looking, you're not chasing like a morph, or you're not chasing trying to try to get like one specific thing. Are you you're a bit of an eclectic keeper,
so,
you know?
Yeah, I like to. If you listen to the podcast that we did on focus versus diverse collections, and,
yes,
and Bill just gives me crap the whole time because I'm talking about how our collections focus. Yeah, it was my wife laughing. It's whatever. It's focused to me. Like, this is the most focused I've been in a long time. And a big part of that is I have reptile ADHD, and it's and it's a little bit it's the excitement of learning about something new for me. So if I find something I don't know a lot about, or I haven't heard of it, or I don't know similar species or something like that, even if it's like, hey, here's this brown gecko, I'm like, I need to learn about that, and I probably need to have it. No, I need 3. All right, get online. Like, you should probably go to a different room while we have this part of the talk.
I mean, she can come in too.
She's starting up dinner, but no, I mean, like, so I used to breed a lot of geckos, and that was my big passion originally getting into the hobby. And that's where I learned Latin, because I started working with all these weird species, and I've always been like that. I've always liked like the less known. Like, everybody had Cresties, I bred Cresties. They were fun, and they helped fund me doing other cool stuff. They were more my bread and butter to fund other stuff I actually really enjoyed. And I liked them, but I'd passed that point where they were super exciting to me. And morphs and line breeding, it's interesting to me, and I enjoy it. I love teaching genetics to kids. It's super cool, and reptiles makes that super easy to do. It's very visual and very easy to explain, Punnett squares to 8-year-olds, which is super cool. I taught a class on college level genetics to kids under 10. Like, it was super cool. And their parents were writing stuff down. They're like, I don't remember this. So like, it was super cool. And that's a really cool way to do it. And I love that, but it's just not something that gets me excited. I've bred some morphs and some ball. I've hatched one clutch of ball pythons because I was like, I have to do it. And I kind of wanted, this is like way back. I wanted a hypo bumblebee, but they were like $4,000 at the time. So I'm like, I had a ghost and what did I have? I had a spider hat ghost and a super pastel ghost. So I was like, I got a good chance. I can hit this. I bred them, didn't hit it. And then but even then, like, that excitement of these guys cutting eggs and like, just like the lottery aspect of it, it was cool, but like, it didn't do that for me. It was just, I cut them open. They were, I don't think I cut them. I think I actually just let them hatch, which I don't know if people realize this, but they have this thing on their face called an egg tooth. They've evolved for millions of years to get out of their own egg. You don't have to cut it. So I let them hatch. And when they came out, I was like, oh, this is neat. They're cool. They're babies. I got them started, but that didn't grab me. But hatching out some of the like more like normal stuff, just stuff that like Israeli dune geckos, stenodactylus geckos. They're like this big. They chirp like birds. They talk to each other. Super freaking cool. Yeah, it freaked me out the first night I had them. I was in college. I was in my room. It was like 2 a.m. I was watching TV. I just got done doing a whole bunch of like homework and stuff. I was just zoning out in my bed, and I kept hearing this like high pitched peep kind of squeak sound. It almost sounded like a baby bird calling. And I'm like, what is that? So I kept sitting there in bed, and I would hear it, and then I would move, and it would stop. And it started freaking me out. I'm like, am I imagining things, or is something wrong with my hearing? Every time I get up, I'd hit mute on the TV, and it would stop. So I'm like, oh, cool. TV speakers are going out or something. Well, then I hit mute, and it didn't stop. So it's like 2 a.m. It's winter in Wisconsin, 4 foot of snow outside. And I'm like, oh my God, a bird hit my window. There's something dying outside my apartment. So I throw on flip-flops because that's the only shoes I wear around the house, even when there's a foot of snow. And, and I walked around the house. You're in Colorado, you get it. Like, why fight it? Just get used to freezing. So I walk around the apartment. There's nothing outside. And I come back inside, and I'm sitting there just frustrated. I'm like, what the heck is this noise? And I heard it again. And I heard it kind of coming from where their cage was. And I'm like, Maybe. So I looked them up real quick, and they're like, oh, they chirp to each other. Super cool. They chirp when they're breeding. They chirp when they're talking in territorial. I woke up one morning to like cheep, 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 cheep. And I realized that there was some stuff going on. They started breeding, and because all of a sudden you just hearing them squeak.
That's amazing. It's so cool.
It's super, super cool. And they're this desert species that lays little hard-shelled eggs. So I started hatch those out. That was one of the coolest first things I ever hatched. It was just this teeny little $5 nobody cared about gecko that now you can't find anymore and barely anybody has. But like that kind of stuff. Like hatching long-tailed grass lizards was super cool. Like they're the coolest little baby lizards ever. They're this big and their tail's like that big. And it's neon orange. And it's so heavy they can't actually run. So when they start to run, they burn out because their tail is too heavy and they got to get the momentum going first. So it's super funny to watch these tiny little things. Cool. And they act like a tiny tegu. Like they tongue flick and they kind of come out and test stuff. Like it's just super cool. And people look at those and like, yeah, it's the anoles and the grass lizards. Who cares? But like those are the things that like me and some of my buddies that are really have been in the hobby for decades and have seen everything that people have ever at. Like, oh my God, that's my dream animal. I'm like, yeah, 10 years ago I had that, whatever. Like now we're kind of coming back and we're like, did you see that? I gotta go to the Triple L table and I'm like, what's the weirdest, stupid little random thing that's probably mislabeled as a species and nobody knows what it is? Because I want a boy and a girl of those. And like they know that now. So when I go to a show, I'll just come over and be like, hey Morgan, what you got? And he's like, I knew you were coming. Come here.
Oh geez.
Yeah, but it's always like some $10 little lizard nobody's heard of or something like that. But that's where I get excited, especially when it's random. Like it showed up at a shipment and they don't even really know what it is and they're guessing. Because then it's like, that's a mystery to me. Like now I got to bust out books and I'm doing scale counts and trying to figure out what region of the country Africa this came from. Because like as much as you think it comes from Africa is helpful, it's not. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of regions and a lot of books to cover one continent. So like that gets exciting, and then like the first time you get to breed them, getting them eating, getting them solid, getting them comfortable with you and being able to interact with them and then being able to just observe them and observe their behaviors. And that stuff is where I nerd out. That's where I get all excited. And then when they breed, that's just icing on the cake. But that's one thing that I really pushed myself 2 years ago was, and this is kind of when my collection shrank and got a little more focused on things I really enjoyed, was I got to a point where, and I think a lot of people have hit this, where I want everything. So I bought everything. Yeah. And then eventually it's like I walk into the room one day and I'm like, God, this is tiring and it's a job. It's not a hobby anymore. It's a job. And it's fun and I love it, but it took something away from it when I had to be down there. And if I didn't, animals were dying. And it was 2 hours, 3 hours of work every couple days or every night. It got to the point where I was just like, I'm producing animals, I'm selling stuff. It's great, but it's just not, it feels like work now. It doesn't feel like fun. So I kind of said to myself one night, I'm like, all right, if everything I kept was worth nothing and I just gave away babies, there was no market for reptiles anymore. You just, what you had, you just gave it away or traded it with friends. What would I keep because I just loved it and wanted to see it and work with it? And that's what I did. I sold off a ton of stuff. I focused down to smaller groups of things. Like that whole snake wall is all stuff from Indonesia. So except for the rosy boa that's in there, that's our lone pet, that's an old man, same thing with the two monitor species I work with, Indonesian. And then after that, we've kind of diversified because Erica's gotten more into the hobby and found some passions in geckos. And I've always liked dart frogs, so I have some dart frog tanks. And, we always have a little bit of stuff from all over. Like the crocodilians are South American and dart frogs are South American. The mantellas are from Madagascar and that's from Indonesia and that's from Africa. But at the same time, like the majority of the stuff we're seriously focused on is all small Indonesian pythons and small monitors. So yeah, it feels focused, but it's not.
I was going to give you a hard time. I was going to so how many species do you currently have? Best guess.
Such a bad question.
I know. It's not a question I know you shouldn't answer.
Probably 40.
Compared
to the 350 geckos I had. and all pairs, not like huge groups. It wasn't like 80 leopard geckos. It was like maybe a trio. Yeah, so it was 100 species. Definitely slimmed down, but
right. And I think the bigger thing is that they're all from kind of the same region. You can all kind of keep them for the most part. And I think you did a podcast with Bill and Teresa about that. Is like it's all kind of in the same.
That was part of the diversity focused diverse collection one. Yeah, because and that was kind of the thing. That was what hit me and started frustrating me too. Is I had a rack of geckos and I had knobtails in this row. Then I had like some Periodura from Madagascar in this row. And like, I had some other stuff from maybe like African little geckos in this row or whatever. And their husbandry was all within their limits for each one. Like they were within their best husbandry, but they weren't optimal for each. It was, this needs to be a little hotter. This should be a little cooler. This should be a little wetter, but it's dry area, dry rack, dry room, whatever. Like it kind of got to the point where I felt like I wasn't focusing the best I could do for each one. And I was just hitting mid ranges to get everybody comfortable. And what ended up happening then is my success rate in breeding went down. My focus and my ability to maintain those animals wasn't as good. It was harder to maintain parameters or to cycle them for breeding when this whole rack, only a couple of the species really need to cycle and the other ones don't. And it just started to make it all complicated. And it just felt like I wasn't giving all those animals my best effort. And I can't do that. I can't be that. So once I realized that, and it kind of felt like that was the end of that immediately. That's where that change had to happen. And that's where I started really thinking about like, okay, like Australian stuff. I love Australia is like my holy grail of living animal habitats. Just everything from that continent. I love it. I don't care what it is. I want to touch it and I need it and I love it. And
you want to get your hands on some liasis?
Oh, God, that's what most of that wall is liasis. So, the things I keep, the other prerequisite for living in my house and being part of my collection is that when I open the cage, you want me to die. Yeah, so that's that wall. but like, and then so but that just it made it so much nicer that whole wall is from the same area of the world. So I run the temperatures pretty much the same. I cycle the whole wall. I can do row by row if I needed, but I'm going to still be running into that. Okay, if this row's off, but these two are on, they're still going to get residual heat. It's not going to cool down that much. So I would have to rearrange the snakes and all that stuff to do. And I just don't want to do that. So the whole thing is all the same, and that makes my life easier when it comes to cycling animals or all of these animals from different areas of the world cycle differently. North American species in colubrids, you cool them. You don't cool Indonesian species because they don't have a winter really. And like there's some species I have that live on islands in the in the Pacific that their low temperature for the year is like 78 and their high is 84, and that's every day forever.
Yep.
And then like their rainy season is every month but September, and that's because there's 2 inches less than 40 inches of rain in September. Like, oh my gosh. So there's not really a seasonality that much. But what is seasonal is like their food supply. So those species, I have to track their food supply, and I'll feed sparse throughout the year and then build up and then pair them. And then other species I have to cool and hibernate. And if I had a wall of a ton of mixed species like that, it would be so difficult. I would have to be keeping such more intense records for every single cage, rather than it kind of negates my need to do that because the whole wall is going to eat today for this month. And nobody else is eating for another month because that's the schedule all of them are on. And it just makes life so much easier.
Yep. And I think that's kind of one of those like little, I don't want to say like meticulous thing because that's absolutely not the right word, but that's one of those things where it's, you can work with a lot of different stuff, but if it's, I think again, throwing back to the podcast that you did about the focus is, you can keep a lot, but if it is similar, like I have an air dry room, and then which is the ambient is high 70s all the time, and then supplemental heat here and there, and then I have a cooler tropical room. The ambient temp is 68 to 72 with added heat here and there. Yep. So, it makes things a little bit easier for that, just kind of like you said. So.
Right. But I think everybody has to go through that, in my opinion, to be totally honest, though. Everybody has to go through they get into the hobby, they find a cool thing, then they find another cool thing, then they start to find that itch and that want, that drive, and that passion and excitement, and then you just go nuts with it and totally do it. Don't like start out going, I'm going to find one animal I like and that's all I'm going to do. Like, go get a pair of everything that makes you excited. Do your research in the beginning first. You're not, for somebody beginning, I want to put this, I don't sound like arrogant, but you're not, I've been doing it for like 30 years. Like, I have so many cages and equipment and books, and I've kept hundreds of species of animals from around the world. I can grab an animal. If you tell me roughly where it's from, I know it's husbandry to get it close enough where I can keep it for a while before I tweak. The entry-level person, you're not going to know the 30 years of things I've learned. So if you just buy something you think is cool and then bring it home and go to set it up, you can end up in a bad situation where the animal doesn't do well. But don't be afraid to be excited about a ton of different things and get into everything, because you really need to experience that much, to be honest, in my opinion. If you really want to find the thing that's like that's my thing. That's the thing I want to work with. That's the species or genus or area of the world that I want to concentrate on because I love these things and they fit in that. And you'll find that eventually, or maybe you won't. Maybe you'll want everything forever, but you don't have to start out with this idea that you have to be focused. It's just over time, that's the path that I took and a lot of people I know have taken, because you get to a point where you know a lot about a lot of things, but I want to be an expert on a few things. And that's where I start to really dig in, like the Offenburg eye that we hatched out last week. Like this weekend, we're taking micrometers and scales, and we're actually pinning them down between two pieces of plastic to start taking measurements of their forelimbs, their fingers, their weights, their tail length, their head diameter, belly pictures, side pictures, all of this different data, so that, because this isn't something that hatches very often, and we really want to be able to add to that basis of knowledge in what we're doing. So a lot of the species we keep, being successful with that species allows us to add to that body of knowledge, because for most of them, it's not that big, versus like, and I don't mean to put this down like negatively, but if you're hatching crested geckos, that body of knowledge of how to care for and hatch crested geckos has pretty much filled the jug it's in. Like husbandry can obviously and absolutely should advance and continue to advance. And there will be advancements within those animals, but they're pretty well understood. Like ball pythons are pretty understood on how you get them breeding. Corn snakes, all those beginner entry level things, those are pretty understood. Even when you get to some of the intermediates, blue tongue skinks, things like that, we have a good understanding of them. We're always learning, and the hobby's still very young, but we're comfortable with the knowledge we have to continue producing them effectively and caring for them properly. With some of these species that we're working with, that body of knowledge is maybe one paper or maybe 2 articles. So being able to add to it, that's something that's exciting to us now too, is now we can focus on those things. And when one hatches, there's 50 measurements I want to take on that one animal, just because no one's ever done it. And we haven't had enough of them to do it or to really think about it. So it kind of makes it exciting too, to know that like just those things I can note from my hobby is something that can add to this big future body of knowledge and drive the hobby forward.
And also working with species that haven't really, been worked with a lot, and certainly not that often. You could be kind of the cornerstone, founding stone of an entire captive bred population, which is amazing, and also take some of the need for wild collecting away.
Exactly. So, and that's the Peacock Monitors. That's actually what we're doing. We have 5.7, 5.6 right now, and then the 5 babies. And basically anybody that ever sees one or knows one's for sale, call me. I'll make sure my wife doesn't hear this. I'll probably buy it.
There it is.
I can hear that. But like these cages, these 3 right here are all Peacock Monitors. These are spinulosus monitors. There's some more peacocks and spinulosus here. Like those are the ones we want to focus on. And at some point I need to have a bigger house or a facility to do this. But I would like to round out with 20 groups or pairs of Peacock Monitors, actively breeding groups or pairs, just because I don't know that they're going to keep coming in anymore. And they're such a cool species.
They are really cool. I would love to get into more monitor species. I just know I don't have the ability to house all of them plus my, in all honesty, way too many ball pythons. So,
well, the nice thing is like that's where we really worked with for a long time was the Odatria, all the dwarf monitors, and I mean I've kept and bred Kingorum and Pilbarensis and Ackies and red and yellow and Gill and I, and I've had a ton of stuff. And over time, I realized the frustrating thing for me with the Australian monitors was they're actually super short lived. They hit maturity extremely fast. Ackies are kind of the exception; they're not as much, but like Kingorum hit sexual maturity in as little as 6 to 9 months. And then the females will start laying eggs at 9 months to 12 months. They breed for 18 months and then they stop and they only live 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's hatch, eat, breed, die. And
it's almost a million.
Yeah, it's crazy. But the other part about it that's frustrating is the husbandry for them and the knowledge, the idea that people have of how to care for them is so bad and so wrong that I went through probably 8 pairs of Kingorum. And I be honest, they all died. And it was because I bought adults when I first got into it, and I didn't realize the breeding cycle and that a 2-year-old adult can be already burnt out. Yeah. So I was getting these adults that were proven, which if anybody tries to sell you proven adults, it means they're burnt out. Don't buy them. If you want to get into those species, buy a bunch of babies and grow them up because that's the only way you'll be successful. But the other part about it is they were never cared for right. So everybody thinks they're desert species, and they are. They do live in these rocky outcrops in dry, arid areas. The problem is we're looking at that through a camera, and we're seeing the rocky outcrops in the sand. What you're not seeing is that 6 inches back in that crack, it is wet and humid and like tropical, like almost like stagnant wet. And that's where they live. They actually live in super humid little crevices and holes and burrows under rocks. They don't live on the dunes of the Sahara. And in captivity, it's very difficult to create that without really thinking it through first. You have to start to think about how are you going to give a monitor that needs 85 for the cool side and 140-degree basking spot, but you also have to make sure it's not a dry tank. So it really takes thinking that through. And most people don't. They just go, it's desert. I'm going to set it up like a Beardy. It's going to be dry. And I'm going to throw some food in there and a water bowl, and it'll be good. And then these animals get dehydrated. They get kidney issues. Almost every single adult that passed away on me that we necropsied had gout and kidney failure from dehydration because everybody treats them like this dry, hot desert species. And you almost have to treat them like, if you want to be successful with them, honestly, in my opinion, set them up like they're a tropical species. Set them up in a wet, humid cage with a super high hotspot, and then just leave it at that. They don't treat them like a desert species because it's too hard to mess it up and mess up the microhabitats with inside that enclosure and end up with an animal that's sick.
Yep.
That's kind of why we walked away from them. It was more of, it wasn't that we were having a problem with like getting, sick breeders or ones that were old. It was some of them came from some of the top people I knew that like still had issues. And I'm like, if this is the best knowledge we have on these species, and most of the animals that I produce and sell that go to new homes are probably going to die an awful death because they weren't cared for properly. It's just not something I want to produce. It's not something I want to put out there. I don't want to know that I'm hatching all these awesome animals and 1 out of 50 is living.
Yeah, that's why I kind of feel about like bearded dragons too. It's like,
yeah. And that's why we kind of moved to the Indonesian stuff where it's not as, almost no one's breeding it. It's still small. It's a little more forgiving. The habitat requirements are a little easier. People will understand if it comes from an island in Indonesia, you need to set it up in a forest habitat. And then they keep it more humid because they think it's tropical and that's better for them. It's just easier. It's more intuitive, I think, with these guys than it is to take like a tiny little monitor that lives in rocks in the middle of the desert and set it up in a tropical habitat so that they can thrive. That's not a connection a lot of people will make.
Yep, I think that's something that I've noticed that I think it's definitely like kind of like the macro habitat versus the micro habitat, kind of like you said, like through the lens of a camera. Where,
yeah.
And I feel like it's really more the desert species, like you said, kind of with
it is
all of them. Like how many Ackies do we see with 3 toes or super
Beardies?
Dry?
Beardies are an animal that I love for what they are in the hobby. but they're actually, one of the episodes we did on like beginner reptiles, that's my number one don't get it as a beginner.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not because they're not good. There's a staple. There's tons of information. It's easy to care for them. That you can get a kit that literally just says bearded dragon and you're done. Like it should be an easy entry level animal. The problem is nobody researches. They don't take that stuff seriously. Metabolic bone disease and hypocalcemia are giant issues. And then the other part of it, just like we said with the other Australian stuff, you cannot categorize animals as desert, and that's the dunes of the Sahara, and it's 180. Yeah. And tropical, and that's the Brazilian rainforest. That's it. There's a plethora of stuff in between that. And that's what kills me with the hobby is we went, oh, that's desert. That's tropical. Set it up tropical, set it up desert. No,
it's not. That's not how it works.
It's not like that. And like leopard geckos are another one that they're always set up wrong. And I don't think anybody I know, even people who've bred them for decades, could show me on a map where they come from and what that actually looks like on the ground.
Well, that, and I don't know, too many people know that there's more than one species of leopard gecko.
Oh yeah, well now there's one because they've all just done this into some monstrosity of whatever it is. But you know, I used to have the rarest leopard gecko on the planet.
What, a normal?
It was a normal het for nothing because it was like I got it wild caught when I was a kid. It lived like 20 years.
That's a thing?
Yeah, dude, it was like a buddy of mine asked me to watch his leopard geckos for a while, and he got in some pet store ones. This was maybe 10 years ago, and I was watching. I had him in my rack next to mine, and I pulled him out one night to feed him, and just looking at them side by side, it was incredible the differences in the head structure, the face, the tail structure. They looked like two completely different species, and it's just because of the inbreeding and the species hybridization and all of that created something that actually looks nothing like an actual maculatus.
Yep. And I think we're definitely seeing that with a lot of the species, really the Australian species, but a lot of the ones that like, this is all we have to work with. This is what we got. Or
there's a lot of bottlenecks. There's a lot of genetic bottlenecks. And it's crazy too. Like Chihuahua, Rhacodactylus, Minero Gecko Chihuahua. The entirety of those that exist in the world in captivity came from about 40 animals.
Yeah.
That's it. And then on top of it, up until I think it was around the mid 90s to the 2000s, up until then, they weren't even differentiating Pine Island versus mainland. They kind of did, but they just crossed them all in the beginning. So anybody who thinks they have pure Pine Islands, unless it's an F1 and the adults are wild caught from like Frank or Philippe or Rapashi or Alan or somebody, that's the only way you know it's pure. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you that every Pine Island and mainland you have has a little bit of the other one in it.
Yeah, I mean, that's
the thing. If only 40 animals come in, and that's in countries around the world, you're going to hit a bottleneck.
Well, and that's kind of it's a bit of a jump, but that's what we'll kind of get to kind of the last bit because we're going for a little while. Kind of like the trend of herpetoculture and reptile keeping. So there's all these things that are really starting to affect that kind of took place back in kind of the 70s, 80s, and early 90s of, the bottlenecks of genetic diversity and, ball pythons taking over species diversity for keeping and stuff. Have you noticed like a shifting of trends? Do you think it's going to, colubrids, it seems like they're coming back in a big, big way. Like, do you have any projections of what you think it's moving?
So I actually next time we'll just do the actual PowerPoint presentation I have called The History of the Reptiles and Trends in the Hobby.
Yes.
Where for an hour, I actually just explained this literal topic. But a lot of it is trends. The trends in the hobby have been followed. There's a couple things that affect trends. Morphs is one. So the new albino or the new pied or the new thing that pops up catches people's attention, drives finances, and gets people focusing on something. So morphs are a big one that starts to drive popularity and focus. Yep. Ease of care is another one. We're always going to have bearded dragons, ball pythons, leopard geckos, cresties. Those are going to be our staples forever because they're easy. There's a lot of information. Those are always going to be popular. Industry leaders can push a trend. You'll notice that with Reptile Industries and Mark and Kim Bell bringing in the step runners. That was almost 10 years ago too. But when they brought the step runners in, they were the first ones to bring them in. And when they did that, I love them and they're super smart. They brought in this species. It's a cool little lizard. Not a lot of people knew about, but they're handleable and they're calm little cool things and they're neat pattern. And they published an article in Reptiles magazine at the same time that they brought in the groups of them and then got them out to the pet stores. So they became popular because everybody saw them, this article on this new cool lizard, and then they also were immediately available. So those took a huge spike in popularity, and then they weren't able to get more, or the spike started to decrease. It was that initial, oh my God, and then it died really quick, and now you don't see them anymore again. So morphs and things like that can cause a trend to happen. Morphs cause a trend to happen. And new species can come up, or new husbandry things like chameleons. Chameleons were the unicorn of reptile keeping. You couldn't have one unless you lived in Florida, period. If you couldn't keep it outside in Florida, it would die until 1985, 86 or 87, when Gary Bagnall started Zoom Ed, or he'd started it before that, but I think that's when he brought in the first UV bulbs. And that unlocked the key we needed to breed chameleons. Now chameleons are like, Veileds are a normal thing. They're captive bred all over the place. Panther chameleons, Jacksons. I mean, all this stuff is still bred. And then we're breeding stuff like Parsons chameleons and Brady Podian and this crazy stuff that like we weren't even able to keep alive long enough to get it to the States to house it, let alone breed it. And because of the advances in husbandry, that's changed that. So that kind of affected Chen too. And I think we see other trends, like we saw a trend in the breeding popularity, especially with ball pythons, which brought people into rack systems and keeping a lot of animals and being a little bit more industrial with how they kept their animals. And then in the last couple of years, last 5 or so, people have just kind of gotten sick of looking at a wall full of drawers, and they want to appreciate their animals again. So now that's actually what happened with us. I'm like, we have all these super cool snakes and we have them in tubs for space. So we shrank down, got it down to where I could create a wall of these cages. And now, like, I'll just sit back in the middle of this U shape and just lean back in my chair and just watch stuff. And I love it. And it's awesome. And like, I missed out on that with racks. And so now there's a push backwards to going more natural, more bioactive, more relative to their actual husbandry. And this is a trend that I'm really appreciating seeing, is because in order to do that successfully, you have to research and you really have to dig in. And people are doing that. New people into the hobby are seeing these built out planted vivs and going, I want that. I don't want a fake plant in a crappy rock or something. I want that. And then that's what they're doing. They're learning and diving in and finding the groups and the people to learn that stuff. And I know I've met people who their first tank they set up for their first reptile was a planted viv, which is, I mean, that's fantastic. That's super cool. So that's one trend I'm really loving right now, is seeing people want to go more back to natural, more back to what these animals actually usually would encounter in the wild, minus the predators and disease. But like, you know, so just bringing it back to like really being more about studying and loving the animal, not just having it.
So do you think that's how it's going to continue? Like, just like a guess, because you see it a lot more than I do or can, or you're kind of, your toes are in more pools.
Yeah, I kind of have a little bit of a hand on a lot of different things. So, yeah. No, I think so. I think that just the animal care in general, humane practices within dog and cat and other animals, and just overall as a society, I think we're wanting to move more towards being better people about how we do things. And I think that that's being a better keeper, being a better animal care provider is something that people are starting to feel that need to do. It's less about, I think that ball pythons actually, I think, are a credit to why this happened too. Everybody bashes on them, but the reality is that whole getting into racks and doing that forced us into this too, because that caused people to finally take the stance of like, okay, I got 5 and I keep them in these tubs and I don't get to interact with them unless I take them out. And this really isn't that. I want something different. And then they see like videos of people's planted tanks or pictures of this stuff, and it's like that's what I want to be looking at while I'm appreciating my pet. And now they're moving back into that. And I think that's going to continue to go that way. And I'm hoping that the industry, and when it comes to manufacturers and things like that, recognize that and start to help create the things that are needed to make that transition easier, so entry-level people can have an opportunity to step up to an enclosure like that and feel they have the opportunity and the resources to do it. Because when you're new, that's a scary thing. Like, it's a gorgeous tank. Everybody gets excited. But trying to think about how to make that an actual reality is scary. It's a lot of unknown. Yeah, that's like looking. You don't go up and look at a giant mansion and go, wow, I could build that in a week. Like, you appreciate it for what it is, and you're like, I don't even know how they did that. That's crazy. It's so cool. And that's how people feel about when they're looking at these tanks when they get into it. And I'm seeing more and more and more drive for that. More, Josh's Frogs, Dude, all these guys popping up that are really driving these things. And I love Josh Willard and Josh's Frogs and Zach and those guys and that team. I mean, what an enormously amazing group of people. Like, so definitely support those guys. Like, giving back money from their sales goes back to conservation. If you buy captive bred mantellas from them, they donate stuff to Project Mitsinju, which is the direct conservation in Madagascar for those animals. I mean, they're a business that I would say, if anybody really wants to grow in this industry, try to emulate what they've done. They've created an amazing business. Everybody that works for them loves them. They're good people. They care about the animals in the industry, and it's not just a dollar thing. But at the same time, in doing that, they've been able to charge premiums for things. They've been able to bring in unique things that get people excited and still create a thriving, growing business. Yeah. I mean, it really is, to me, that should be the poster child for what most people are doing.
Which is absolutely awesome. So I know are other kind of like larger companies like Zilla and stuff starting to starting to get ideas like that out there to make it a little bit more accessible, I think, like you said, for you know.
I think it definitely is. Like, Zoomed came out with those fake bromeliads and like staghorn fern. I think that, like, at first I was like, that is so dumb. It's like, why? But why do we need more decor? But after like looking at it, I kind of really like where they were going with it. I mean, it's still not live, but that is a big step in the right direction to at least getting there.
Yeah, exactly. So that's yay.
Well, and that's all I want to see. Is I like seeing, the innovations. There's so much cool stuff coming in the future. With Zilla, there's other companies that are creating some amazing stuff, and then there's a lot of pop-ups that people don't even exist yet. That I'm just excited to see this hobby continue to grow. People start to pop up and add their pieces to it. Like some of the people making caging, Terra Orb. If you haven't seen Terra Orb cages, they're so cool. What an awesome concept for caging. And just some dude just had the idea, and then Mike just like ran with it, and now it's this flexible plastic circular enclosure that, I mean, it's super cool. And innovative and unique, and like Leland Ward and the PVC cages he's making, and all these different people making these different unique products and unique variations on what they do. It's adding so much value and so many resources to the hobby, and it's super cool to be able to watch, especially from going back to when I was a kid, where I'm like, I got a tank, I'll go outside and dig some dirt up and put it in there. Like, got a fish tank, I'll fill it with dirt and some leaves from the backyard, and then I'll get my salamander in there. And like, that was my resources. But now, I mean, it's crazy what you can do. And we're still a young hobby, which is still crazy to me too. I mean, the reptile industry as we know it has only existed for about 35 years, and not even that long. I mean, really probably more like 20, 25.
And I think, and I'm hoping that like these kind of trends are going to make it so that way we're able to keep doing it despite some people's best efforts.
Yeah, exactly. And we're always going to have those people fighting back on us. It's just about continuing we talk community and we say community a lot. And I love when I hear that word, because I like stopping people and being like, just out of curiosity, are you a member of USARK? Are you a member of your Herp Society? Like, you say community because it's a big group of people, but if we're not interacting and working together for the benefit of what we do, then we're not a community. We're a group of people. So if we want to say community, we really need to start stepping up what we really believe that means, and supporting each other and supporting the what this hobby is, and fueling it to continue to grow. And it's growing exponentially right now. That the sales, reptile is one of the only parts of the pet industry that throughout COVID and through everything going on is on an increase, a double-digit percentage increase year over year, even month over month of people coming into the hobby. Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, the shortages on animal and livestock right now for stores, and I mean, Zilla, Zuma, and Exoterra, we're all out of stock of most of our products. We can't get it in fast enough. It's insane that what's happening right now. But at the same time as that's a positive, that also means that the people like us who are in the hobby, who are enthusiasts, who know the shows, know USARK, know what this industry really is, it's a huge thing. We really all need to step up on solidifying the foundation that this hobby needs to continue to grow at that rate, or it's going to get too big and things are going to fall apart, and it could grow faster than we can responsibly do it if we don't pay attention. Luckily, there's a lot of people paying attention. It's not enough, though. Everybody who has an opportunity to create some kind of positive impact in the hobby, whether that be, a kid comes to your booth at a show and it's annoying because he's not going to buy that ball python, but he's going to ask you 20 minutes worth of questions.
Yep.
Dude, take the time. Take the time to do that, because that is way more important than you think.
Yep, and that's what I really like. That I think that's where it's starting to go. A lot of I always see these memes online of the old timer reptile keeper that just treats all the new kids in there asking the dumb questions hey, is this color reptile sand good? Instead of just calling him a myriad of spinning a tapestry of profanity and making fun of this guy, taking the time to sit there and say, hey, here are some other choices. This is why this may not be the best choice. I'm starting to see a better trend of that, and I think that's just going to be something absolutely amazing. So
yeah, it's definitely important to our future, and I mean, anytime you can do it, it's important. It's the ripple effect. It's the butterfly effect. You never know how that 10 minutes of talking to that kid is going to affect the future of what you're doing. Especially what if that kid grows up and ends up being the mayor or head of the president of the board of the town that you live in. You're going to really be happy that you were nice to him and you got him excited about reptiles instead of being a prick and pissing him off. Or making him feel bad so he didn't like reptiles and didn't get into it, or deterred him from the hobby. Then when a law comes up in your town, he's just going to be like, that guy lives over there, approved. Yeah, you want to avoid that. We want to create our allies, not our enemies.
Yep. So, which is kind of what you did for me, helping me out with this podcast too, because I'm a little guy just kind of popping out of the blue, and did you absolutely took the time out of your obviously very busy day with me. So really,
man, everybody's got to get in somewhere, and anybody who's willing to take the time to put good information out there and try and improve the hobby, I don't care if you're 2 or 92, I have time for you.
Which I greatly appreciate. Thank you so much. Just to wrap this up, because I know everybody does this on the podcast, so I'll do it too with my own little flair, I guess. So, if they want to get a hold of you, so not necessarily to ask about when is Zilla making my PVC cage, or when is
right,
but, to learn about Friends of Scales, or to research MAHS about what if they could emulate that, or what you're doing and what they can do, how can they get a hold of you that way? What are the
man, there's very few ways to not get a hold of me. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can send smoke signals to me now. I have an app for that. No, but I mean, if you Google my name, you'll find stuff, but you can find me through the Madison Area Herpetological Society. Under the board page is my email. You can find me through Facebook, Instagram. I think I'm on Twitter. I don't think I use it that much, but I think it exists. Yeah, you can message the Herp Society on Facebook. You can send us a message through the email. You can message the rescue, and Erica and the rest of the board and myself are definitely willing to answer questions for people, or if you're looking for a new pet and stuff like that. We ship all around the country. So, and yeah, I mean, it's not hard to find. You can just type my name into Google and then reptiles after it, and I think it's 4 pages of stuff. It shouldn't be hard to find.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you again so much, Ryan. Really appreciate you coming on. That's about it. I don't have any other final crazy weird stuff.
No, well, thanks for having me, man. Like I said, anybody that wants to spend the time to just improve the hobby and get good information out there and has passion, like that's what this is about. That's why I love what I do. That's why I love the people I'm surrounded by and the hobby and the community of people that I actually have a community of people all working together. That's who I surround myself with. And that's it's improved every part of my life. And I love it. And I will spend the rest of my life dedicating to giving back to it. So I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to be a part of that with you. And yeah, no, I'm happy to talk anytime, man. I don't think we could do enough of these to get all the stuff out of my brain, but anytime you want to chat, I'm down.
Well, I will probably hit you up again probably later this year. Who knows?
Sounds good.
Travel gets safer. I might come over and hit you up too.
Yeah, absolutely. You're ever around here, like you get some Tinleys back, you got to come down here and we'll hit all the cool stuff that's out here. Go feed the Komodo dragon.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Cool. Well, all right. Well, then, everyone, hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.